Welcome to rePROs Fight Back, a podcast on all things related to sexual and reproductive health rights and justice. Hi, rePROs. How's everybody doing? I'm your host, Jenny Wetter, and my pronouns are she, her. So y'all, I am recording this way in advance because I was out all last week. And actually, today is my first day back in the office. After some time off, I went to a leadership training course that was for, it was like 4 days. And then I added on a fun vacation with a friend at Disney because I was in Orlando. So like I said, I'm recording this in advance, so I can't tell you that it was amazing, although I'm sure it was. But I'm very much looking forward to it. It's the Food and Wine Festival at Epcot, so looking forward to going and eating all of the amazing food from around the world. So that sounds really exciting. And it's also that time of year where Magic Kingdom has their big Halloween party. And so when I was home this summer visiting my mom, we spent some time putting together a costume for Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween party. And so I am dressing up as Ursula. So I'm very much excited and looking forward to that. I'm only a little worried is not the right word, but I have like this big tulle skirt that we put together that's super fun. But also it's going to be so hot that I'm just like worried I'm going to die from all of the heat with all of the layers of things I need to wear. But I'm super excited. It should be a lot of fun. And I'm excited to eat all the amazing food and see the Disney characters and their Halloween costumes. Just all the things to look forward to. And then, like I said, today is my first day back in the office. So I'm sure I am buried under a pile of email trying to get through all of the things and looking forward to the rest of the year. Now that I have that big thing out of the way, it's like time to move on to like my next big project, which is getting ready to go to the American Public Health Association. And I have to finish my presentation for that because I'm doing a presentation on our 50-state report card. So got to get that PowerPoint all put together. So busy. It's always just on to the next thing. But yeah, I can't believe when this comes out, it'll be October next week, which is wild to think about. So because it's going to be October next week, it seems like it's time to do a SCOTUS preview episode. And if I'm talking about the Supreme Court, you know I'm going to turn to one of my favorite people, and that's Mason Pieklo at Rewire News Group and co-host of the Boom Lawyered podcast. So excited to dig into all the things to be keeping an eye out for this upcoming term of the Supreme Court. With that, let's turn to my interview with Jess. Hi, Jess. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me again. It is always a pleasure to join your show.
I always love having you on. And just for any newbies, maybe we should do a quick, hey, Jess, would you like to introduce yourself before we get started?
Oh, sure. I'm Mason Pieklo. I am executive editor and SVP at Rewire News Group and co-host of the Boom Lawyered podcast, Boom Lawyered with Amani Gandy.
I am excited to talk to you because I'm always excited to talk to you, but also, oh my God, are we really talking about the Supreme Court again already? It just feels like, ugh.
Here we are again. A new term is upon us in a matter of weeks when we're recording this. Just like snap of our fingers. They're back.
I know. I'm not ready. I'm never ready, but I'm feeling extra not ready this year for some reason.
Well, the good news is we don't have an abortion case on the docket yet.
That's true.
We could start with that.
Yes. Okay. So that's we'll call it good news for the moment. So I was looking through what was already there and worth us talking about. And the case that I think is looming very large for us that's already on the docket is the Skrimetti case. Do you maybe want to talk a little bit about what that case is?
Sure. United States versus Skrimetti is probably right now the biggest case on the court's docket in the issue spaces that we really care about. And that is a case that involves challenges to Kentucky's and Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care for minors. And at the heart of that case is whether those bans violate the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. Both of those bans in particular single out transgender their youth for being transgender and targeting their healthcare as a result of it. So it's a real test of how the court views the humanity of trans folks.
Yeah, I'm real worried about this case.
Yeah, I mean, so advocates from the ACLU are the ones challenging those bans, and Chase Strangio is working, as hard as anybody in this country times 12 on justice for trans folks and trans kids in particular. And I'm always concerned whenever anything gets before this court, but I do believe in the advocacy efforts behind it in terms of the need to do this, right? Chase talks a lot about how litigation at this current moment is about mitigating harms and creating space for political change because lawsuits often take time, so whatever the Supreme Court does in this case is not going to be the end of the conversation at any stretch. And depending on the advocacy, there is the possibility that it doesn't go as poorly as maybe we're braced for. I will say that the Biden administration submitted their initial brief, and it was a full-throated defense of trans kids and their families, which was a really lovely thing to see. Solicitor General Preligar has been phenomenal before the court. And so, there are a few reasons to not think that this is the end of the world. The court also did not take, in that case, a question of parental rights question. So one of the ways that we have talked about on the show that conservatives are starting to reimagine their attacks on healthcare of all kinds is through the lens of parental rights. And the court stayed out of that for now. So that's another silver lining.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah, I have full faith in Solicitor General Preligar and Chase Strangio. I know they're going to be absolutely amazing. Mm-hmm. I feel like just anything concerning rights in front of this court will make me nervous for a while.
Really, truly. I think that's the right approach. And, the reality is the Solicitor General Preligar and Chase will be making their arguments to maybe one or two justices, right? There are a few just, and that's it. They don't have to convince Sam Alito of anything. They can just ignore him. I mean, they can't, but you know what I mean. They should. Everybody should ignore Sam Alito.
I mean, we did get a good trans decision out of them before. So it's not, even though I'm nervous, that's just inherent nervousness. I definitely don't feel like it's for sure going to be terrible.
Yeah, and I mean the reality is that there are a lot of trans rights cases that are percolating in the lower courts as well, and so we are going to have to get comfortable being discomfortable or uncomfortable for right now because it is a legal issue that is going to come up again and again and again as conservatives continue to bully trans kids.
Well, I mean, this is going to be a short podcast. That's the only one I saw on the docket. So I guess there's nothing else I need to think about.
Yeah, we can talk about cats. No.
Oh, no.
I mean, we can, but sadly I'm here to report that there are a few more cases that we should be paying attention to because just because they're not on the docket yet doesn't mean they won't be. Let's start with some familiar faces. So last term, the court had not one, but two abortion cases, as you well remember. That feels like it was literally just a couple days ago. One involving...
But also forever ago?
Lifetimes.
Yes.
It'll be lifetimes by the time this episode actually airs. Who knows? But so last term, we had the challenge to mifepristone access, and the court basically kicked the can on that by a couple ways. That case has been revived by a collection of conservative state attorneys general led by Idaho, and that case is currently before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, since Idaho's leading it. And they are looking to basically piggyback on the arguments that the physicians who didn't have standing made that first time around. So since the court didn't decide the mifepristone case on the merits last time, these conservative attorney generals want them to the second time. Idaho is up to some nonsense also, again, at the Ninth Circuit in the EMTALA case. So the real bad case from last term, I think the one that folks were really the most nervous about because of the damage it could do in a couple different ways, was this case challenging where the court looked at the conflict between EMTALA's requirements that hospitals that receive Medicare funding, emergency rooms, provide stabilizing care, including abortion, if that is required for a patient, and states like Idaho that have total abortion bans that would not allow that, or that have meaningless exceptions so narrow that like it functions as a total ban. The court also kicked the can on that case, and Idaho has said it would like the Ninth Circuit to rule and finish the job. So those are both cases that could conceivably find their way before the court again, before this term is over. The court also had a little kerfluffle on the shadow docket recently involving Oklahoma and its fight with the Biden administration and HHS over Title X funding. So Title X has requirements that it places on states that get its money, that they do certain things or not do certain things when it comes to reproductive health care. And Oklahoma has a list of things that it is doing in terms of not wanting to refer folks, not wanting to mention abortion, just really like the redux around that. And the Biden administration was like, you can't do that, so we're not going to give you money. And Oklahoma said, whoa, hold up, and appealed right to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court stayed out of it for now. That's still a live fight. And so those conflicts between the Biden administration on Title X and states that want to do their own thing with family planning monies that go against those sort of scientific evidence-based requirements, that could come up. And that looks a lot like the EMTALA fight, right? What we're seeing is a lot of bubbling up between federal or conflicts around federal protections or requirements around reproductive health care and gender-affirming care, because we can talk about that in Section 1557 in a second, and states that want to ban it or restrict it or regulate it.
It's always like wild to me, the like states, but also grantees in like not just Title X, but in other areas that are like, we want your money, but like, we're not actually going to do some of this service stuff you want us to do, but like we're owed your money.
Yeah. I mean, and it's kind of, rich when conservatives talk about an entitlement mentality when literally that is what that is. Yeah. I have a sleeper case for you.
Oh, no. Okay.
Do you remember the fight in Alabama over IVF and that Supreme Court decision declaring fetuses as people, and that means no more IVF storage?
I do remember that. And I was really kind of hoping it was like gone. I didn't have to worry about it anymore.
There is currently a petition before the United States Supreme Court that they'll conference on to start on September 30th that would hopefully end that case. But, the fight has continued. And so, I think this is like a really interesting one just to dive into for a second. So I'm sure folks remember that I think it was February, March, sometime around there, this Alabama Supreme Court issued its ruling that basically greenlit wrongful death suits against IVF clinics under the state's amendment that says life begins at conception. The legislature did a fix, that there's problems with the fixes. Everybody kind of forgot about it and figured it was more or less like an electoral question now, right? Like a campaign issue. But one of the plaintiffs have kept their lawsuit going. Felicia Burdick-Asen and Scott Asen are still trying to convince a jury that a mobile fertility clinic negligently caused the destruction of one of their fertilized eggs. So they're still suing. And they claim that the legislative fix that Alabama did after that Alabama Supreme Court ruling actually violates the state constitution. Same arguments. And so the clinic is like, whoa. And normally the Supreme Court doesn't step in and issue or take up cases from state Supreme Courts because they're kind of the final word on state law.
Right.
This is one of those cases where they might, because of all of the chaos that has ensued in Alabama and elsewhere as a result of folks understanding what fetal personhood really means when it's put in place and enforced. And so this one makes me nervous for a lot of reasons. I think, we definitely need an end to the fetal personhood conversation. I don't know that I want the Supreme Court to have the last word on it, though, Jenny.
Yeah, what has always been, like, all these words feel wrong of, like, surprising and, like, whatever, but, like, consequences, like, actions meet consequences, right? Like, I feel like the fetal personhood conversation was like, this is a great idea, we need to do it, and, like, and, like, all the people in the repro space were like, okay, but we're like, what about like all these things, and then it like gets enacted in Alabama, and they're like, wait, what? Oh, IVF? What? We didn't think about that. And like,
yeah,
but we've been talking about it for it feels like a decade.
Yeah. And some folks even longer, So it's really, that case, for obvious reasons, has me concerned. Although, it could be an opening for the court to, do we think Amy Coney Barrett really wants to be the person who helped end IVF, considering how many Republican women rely on fertility services? I don't think she does. So, and I don't know that John Roberts wants that either. So, they may not be able to stop the nonsense around, or they can, but they won't. Like they may not be able to stop whatever legal opinion nonsense comes out of Sam Alito, Clarence Thomas. Doubtful, maybe Neil Gorsuch on this. I don't know. And so we'll see, so the court may take that case up. They may ignore it. They may conference. If they conference on it multiple times, then I think we know that they're eventually going to take it. And so I'm going to be watching that one closely. And then the Biden administration, as much as we have been difficult and critical of them for not doing nearly enough, they have done some things. They've done some rulemaking around Section 1557 in the Affordable Care Act, and they've done some rulemaking around Title IX with regard to sex discrimination, so that Title IX is aligned with that good ruling that we were talking about earlier. Naturally, conservatives have challenged both of those sets of rulemaking, and that's in the litigation pipeline as well. And given the topics and given the fights between states and federal law there, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point the Supreme Court steps in to those issues as well, particularly the Title IX rulemaking one. And that is, that's a whole...
That has been like chaos watching that unfold over... honestly, August, but it wasn't really the whole summer. It was like every other day there was like a new thing in August. And if people want like the deep dive into that, we do have an episode where I talked to Shwali Patel at the National Women's Law Center about Title IX and what was going on. So definitely check that out for like the deep dive version.
Yeah. And so I think, what feels like a quiet or low-key start to the Supreme Court term is really going to be an extension of the close of the last term, where they didn't decide any of the hard cases. Well, we have the agency case. Like, there were bad ones. I don't want to suggest that there, but, for abortion purposes, they didn't do anything in the cases before them because of the politics, because of the election. And the beginning of the term is October, and the election is November. I don't anticipate for things to start getting spicy at the court until December or January. And the other thing to consider is that a change of administrations, whether it's to a Harris administration or not at all in the other direction, almost guarantees at least one Supreme Court retirement, and the circus that is around a nominee and replacement.
Yeah, that's always so much to go through. The other thing I was thinking of, like, that you like touched on briefly, was the other bad decision that was from last term, the agency one. And like, I'm sure we're going to start seeing, again, consequences for your actions of how that's going to unfold.
Yeah, and we already are, actually. I mean, for me to say it's a quiet start to the Supreme Court term makes it sound like they're not doing anything.
Yeah.
There are, there's some EPA cases given. So there's a lot of climate justice cases, some death penalty cases. So obviously, like, still big issues. But last term in Loper Bright, the court basically upended the entire relationship between how federal agencies and federal courts operate, and in particular, who has the final say over agency regulations. And guess what, folks? It's not the agency anymore. It's federal judges like Reed O'Connor and Matt Kaczmarek. And so chaos has ensued, as you might imagine. This is a huge opening for the conservative legal movement to challenge regulations that they don't like and challenge the evidence on it. And again, we talk about abortion and repro being sort of the tip of the spear of the conservative attacks. What are they using in those challenges to, environmental protections like the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, and nothing but a bunch of junk science, right? Like, studies sponsored by Chevron kind of thing.
The thing that has followed me through all the versions of my career, junk science.
Unfortunately, what Loper Bright does, among other things, is really greenlight that industry. So there is a financial incentive for people to publish nonsense on the right. I mean, there was always a little bit, but now it's like, that's a cottage industry.
Yeah, and it has been amazing how much of that has gotten into all the things, but like Supreme Court opinions.
Yeah.
I mean, lower court opinions. Like some of the Miffy case had so much junk science in it.
I mean, the current Republican nominee for president is nothing but, a conspiracy theorist huffing man. He has an entire ideologue bench that he has instilled. You're telling me they're not all reading the same nonsense from the same Reddit thread? Of course they are.
Man, so many things, and thinking through this term and then possible retirements. Like, there's just so much to keep an eye on for the next, year.
Yeah. Plus. So I think we'll see really after the presidential election and whatever shakes out there, I think we'll see the role that the court wants itself to play, and whether that's a spoiler for progressives and their policies or an enabler to the conservative legal movement and, frankly, a lot of the Project 2025 goals. I mean, that's Leonard Leo all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah. October, so soon. Oh. Okay. Is there anything else you're keeping an eye on, even like that's not going to get to the Supreme Court? Because I feel like this year, because I feel like there have been a couple other things that have been like, oh, got to keep an eye on this.
So do you remember DeAnda? The DeAnda case.
Yes.
So the DeAnda case out of Texas involved a challenge to Title X requirements for access to contraception for minors without parental notification and consent. And the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals said that Texas's parental consent law, which requires parents be told if their kids are getting anything, actually trumps Title X. And the Biden administration did not appeal that decision. And I understand the strategic reasons why they did not. That decision stays on the books. And because the Fifth Circuit covers Louisiana and Mississippi, arguably extends there. Well, would it surprise you that Louisiana has legislation working its way through to amend its parental consent laws so that it mirrors Texas's for purposes of evading Title X's requirements?
No, I would not be surprised at all.
This is going to be the new thing. I mean, I've seen this playbook, the conservative
before.
Legal movement. We've seen them take little nibbles with parental rights, but now we're really going to see it, right? Tennessee it was the only state to successfully enact a travel ban in this recent, for abortion care in this recent legislative session. I think like 4 other states tried it. Idaho already had its. So there's, and the guise of that is a reimagining of the parental rights movement as dictated by Moms of Liberty type groups. So that's really something that I'm keeping an eye on. And the degree to which the Trump judges are successful in really having their thumbs on the scale on these issues. Court reform has to be a major policy issue for Democrats and progressives from here until it's done. Because as you've heard me say in any time I'm on this show, none of the priorities we care about, forget abortion for a second, literally none of the priorities that we care about as human beings stand a chance with this Supreme Court, let alone the law that's getting shaped by the jamokes in the appeals courts and district courts below.
Yeah, and I think, people may hear some of this parental consent stuff and not quite see how big it is, but this is how early in the after Roe, how they started chipping away at abortion was putting in place parental consent. You're seeing this with the gender-affirming care stuff with minors. So this is just starting to chip open that door so that they can take it all away.
Yeah, and we've seen that, right? Parental consent around abortion care is in the same breath as spousal consent. And bans on gender-affirming care for minors have no problem being extended by courts and legislators to adults as well. That's the whole point for conservatives of introducing them to minors, against minors in the first place.
Okay. So that's a lot of court stuff to think about. Let's think about what are some things people can do right now to get involved, because there are so many different cases happening, but there's got to be a way that people can get involved.
Absolutely. Well, courts and lawmakers aren't going to save us. Community is where the real work is. So always and truly invest in your community, whether that's your time, your resources, your emotional labor, whatever that is. Start there. So local abortion funds, city councils, state elections, school boards. These are places to put your organizing and activist energy and then work your way up. The national orgs right now are well funded. They're well taken care of. They got it. It's the local folks, particularly doing direct aid, that need the most help. And selfishly, it feels great to give to those organizations when you can see directly where that is going, as opposed to being another faceless, contributor to a national org for $25. So really start there. And then if folks want to, I always say the advocacy at your, dining room table, at your, grocery stops, the places where you talk to people who aren't in your online communities or in your very advocacy focused spaces are where we can really start to move the needle right now. And people are receptive.
Yeah. And for some of the things, I think particularly around gender affirming care and some of these areas is people are just not as familiar, and they may just have questions and things get presented as reasonable to them. And so it sometimes it's not even a heavy lift to just clarify why this is problematic, and it can make a huge difference.
It really can. And so I think, starting from a place of grace with folks is good, because, you'll know right away if they're worth your time.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, Jess, as always, it is so lovely to talk to you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Always, always. I look forward to coming back and seeing if any of my predictions on these cases pipelining their way up prove to be true.
Okay, y'all, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Jess. Like I said, she's one of my favorite people to have on. It's always so great to talk about all the legal things with her. And if you aren't already listening, I cannot recommend Boom Lawyered enough. I am not a lawyer, so whenever there is anything touching anything legal in the reproductive health space, reproductive rights space, reproductive justice space, I always listen to Jess Nimani's podcast, Boom Lawyered. I listen to it as soon as it comes out, and it is how I figure out my way through all of these things. So if you are not listening, you absolutely should be. It's really amazing, and you should definitely be reading Jess's reporting as well at Rewire News Group. Okay, with that, I think I will just say I will see you all next week. Bye! If you have any questions, comments, or topics you would like us to cover, always feel free to shoot me an email. You can reach me at Jenny, Jennie, at reprosfightback.com, or you can find us on social media. We're at rePROs Fight Back on Facebook and Twitter, or rePROs FB on Instagram. If you love our podcast and want to make sure more people find it, take the time to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Or if you want to make sure to support the podcast, you can also donate on our website at reprosfightback.com. Thanks all.